Hi, my name's Tom Dolder. I've come here to explain a little bit about the VacUpack Elite to you. It's a very simple and easy to operate machine. It's stainless steel, as you can see, and it is a channel style machine. So it's very easy to load. It has a crimping heat seal bar in it, or the heat bar actually crimps the bag shut more than just sort of seals it on a flat surface. The VacUpack Elite is a very simple and easy to operate machine. There are 6 buttons across the top which control all of its functions. The on-off button, so when it's at rest, you just turn the machine off and the first light will be red when it's off. When you want to turn it on, push and hold that button down. All the lights will light up. The circuit boards in there will think for a minute and it will come to what I call its default setting. So the seal time always defaults to number 3. I like to run just a dry bag, or if you're just sealing the open end of the bottom end of an open bag or an open roll of material, run the heat cycle at its number 2 setting. The automatic mode is used to turn the machine on and then run the heat cycle as the machine sees fit. And the manual cycle is for running the machine and turning the heat cycle on when you see fit. So let's just make a bag and we'll show you how this thing works. If you're using a bag material that's on a roll, because this machine does not have a bag roll storage compartment or a razor blade in it, one of the things we'd like to explain to you is how to seal the bottom end of a new bag effectively. So take a little material off the roll, and this just gives you an open tube that you need to seal one end of to make a bag. Aim the bag so the open end of the bag is just on the heat bar, but not into the channel. Close the lid. We'll demonstrate the automatic mode for you first. So just push the button and let the machine draw a vacuum. And the heat cycle will turn on automatically with this machine at this point. So as soon as the light starts blinking, that means the heat cycle is working. And when the machine shuts off, you will have created a vacuum on the bottom end of your bag. So now we've effectively sealed the bottom end of an open tube of bag material. Now we're going to suck something up for you. So we've got some M&Ms here. We'll show you how the manual setting works on this next operation. So in the manual setting, this time since we are going to evacuate the air from the bag, the open end of the bag needs to sit just inside the channel this time. Make sure your bag lays flat across the heat seal bar. Clamp it in. And we're going to use the manual setting, which will turn the pump on. And as soon as that machine starts to pull a vacuum in there, you can push the heat cycle as you want to or as you see fit. So this comes in pretty handy if you're doing things that are wet or juicy. You can actually stop the heat cycle anywhere you want. And or if you're doing something that requires a little bit less vacuum, like a loaf of bread, you can hit the heat cycle before it actually starts to crush things. So thanks for watching the VacUpack Elite. This is our latest machine that carries the VacUpack name. It sucks good, it seals good, it has very simple, easy to understand controls. So if you can't figure out how to make it work, or you just need to ask some simple questions, or even some complicated questions, give me a call. My name's Tom. I'm at 1-800-227-3769. Thanks. The VacUpack Elite can do jars as well as bags. So on the inside of the channel is a little stand-up pipe which allows you to plug in a jar sealer. Now, jar sealers are a very simple device. They have a rubber gasket on the inside of the jar sealer and 3 prongs that basically help the lid to lift off the jar without gluing itself to the inside of the jar sealer. So when you want to create a vacuum inside the jar, put the flat lid on top of the jar, plug it in, and in this case we're going to put the open end of the hose on the suction port and use the controls to turn the machine on so that all the lights light up and hit the pump switch. Now this will extract the air from the jar and create a vacuum on the inside of the jar. And in this case of packing peanuts, they're sort of expanding a little bit. When the machine shuts off, uncork the jar sealer and remove the jar, and that keeps your lid vacuum packed nice and tight. So since the lid is vacuum packed nice and tight on it, the next time you want to open the jar, I use the back set of a sturdy knife blade in my kitchen and then just give the lid a little bit of a pry up, and that will let air back into the jar and take the lid off quite easily. One of the reasons that the VacUpack Elite is so popular with us is the fact that it does handle liquids better than most of the channel style machines out on the market today. We're going to use this, this is what I call my surrogate fish. It looks a little like Willie the killer whale, I think, or something, but we'll put a little bit of Armor All on him. And generally, any time that you're doing something like fish or meat products, you are going to suck a little bit of juice up into the machine. So again, we're going to use the manual setting. And because we know we're going to suck some juice up across the heat seal bar, we are going to increase the seal time to its maximum setting. We'll use the manual heat cycle so that we can watch when the juices start to move. And once we see them moving, you push the seal button so that the heat seal will activate, and then keep your eye on those juices. They need to stop moving, and then you know that the bag is sealed. This is one of the few channel style machines I've ever seen that will actually seal a bag even when it's wet. So the on-off switch is in its red position. So when that little red light is red, the machine is basically shut down. And you can push any of the other buttons and have no effect because the machine is basically off. So you're not running power through it. When you press and hold the on-off button, all the rest of the lights will light up and the machine will come back to rest at its, what I call its default position. That leaves your heat seal set at number 3. And the automatic, manual, pump, and seal lights are all off at this point. So the automatic mode allows the machine to turn on, run through the complete cycle, and shut the machine off after the heat cycle is complete. When you use the manual setting, the manual cycle runs until you push on the heat seal or turn the machine off. The pump, it's just a system to run the pump without running the heat cycle. So you use the pump setting when you're vacuum packing jars. And the seal button has just one button, and the seal timer can adjust the amount of heat cycle that happens in the machine. And it's basically a graduation. Each time you push it, it lands at a different position. I use number 2 to seal the bottom edge of a bag or a dry bag most of the time on this machine. Seal position number 3 is going to be a little bit harder heat seal, and I generally use number 4 if I know I'm going to pull some juice up into the machine. Oh, there is one other thing I'd like to explain to you about this machine, and that is if you decide that you need to stop the cycle at any point, one of the things about this machine is once you stop the cycle by turning the machine off, the lid will stay stuck down. So for instance, if you're trying to evacuate something and you need to change something before you seal the bag, for instance, if you're in the automatic mode and you evacuate it, but you don't want the heat cycle to run right away, you can turn the machine off. Now, what happens is that the machine wants to hold on to the bag because it has created a vacuum inside that channel, and it's not going to let go of it right away. So if you turn the machine back on, it will devac or put air back into the channel so that you can open the lid easily. So I just want you to be aware that it is possible to stop before you heat seal the bag. And it works the same way in both the manual and the automatic mode. So if you're running a manual setting and your bag wrinkles or you're not quite sure it's going to be set exactly the way you'd like it to. When you do turn the machine off, the pump will stop, but you're not going to be able to open the jaw of the machine up until you turn the machine back on again. So it will devac or let air back into the chamber, so you could actually take the bag out and realign it and start over again. So let's just hit the automatic mode, let it evacuate, and run the heat cycle. And that makes the machine pretty easy to use. Now, one of the things about this machine that I've liked is the fact that the evacuation port for the channel is actually sitting up off the deck on a little standpipe. Should you flood the machine with enough water to actually fill it up about a ½ inch deep and start sucking water up into the machine, it is protected by a water trap on the side of the machine. So any liquids are not going to hit the pump because it will be collected inside the water trap. Now, of course, when you do suck a bunch of juice up in here, you are going to create a little bit of a mess. So after every bag that you suck some water up into, just give the channel a quick wipe out so that you clean up the area so you can start afresh. When you get done making a big mess with the machine, this bottom gasket comes out quite easily, and you just sort of clean out the trough and make sure this entire bottom area is nice and clean. The upper gasket also comes out. And these are replaceable gaskets, but they should last you for several years before you need to replace them. Just make sure they go back into their channel nice and flat. I usually put in both ends first and then try and get them to squeegee in. You will find that a neoprene gasket is something that will take the shape of whatever you put it in, so I just kind of squeegee them in here and make sure that they line up and lay nice and flat. And the bottom one is the same way. Kind of pat it into place. And you might want to check the machine once you've replaced the channel gaskets like that and cleaned it. So just close the lid, turn the pump on, give it a little bit of a push, and that's going to seat those gaskets really well. And once the machine has created a vacuum, again, just hit the off button. That will turn the machine off. You might want to turn it back on again so that it devacs the channel, and that will seat your gaskets in there just fine. So when I go to the butcher shop and I get either a half a beef, or in this case we got some buffalo, I take it home and put it back into a vacuum bag before I put it in the freezer. The biggest reason I do this is a lot of people say that the butcher paper is plenty of protection around your meat to keep it fresh long enough to get around to eating it. I find that if you have something wrapped, it's real easy to put it into a bag and then draw the air out of it. What I'd like you to notice is that when the air comes out of this package, we're also going to be sucking the juice out of it, which means it's not as tightly wrapped as they lead you to believe. So let's give it a try and see how it goes. So remember, if that juice starts to come out of there, that means that the package isn't really sealed. But once we run it through here, it'll be sealed and ready to be put away for a long time to come. So I find it always is a good idea to reseal any of the bags or meats that you put into the freezer, and that'll stay sealed and stay fresh a lot longer in your freezer. So I like to make bread, but I don't like to make it all the time. I also buy flour in 50-pound packages because it's a lot less expensive than the little 5-pound packages. I always take the flour down and put it in these little handy lunch-size sacks, and I try and keep the flour sort of confined inside the paper sack so that the dust doesn't travel up and get into the machine. So anytime I'm putting flour in one of these little packages, I just fold it over and then run a little piece of tape on the top of it so that it stays confined. And that way you don't end up, if you put flour just into a vacuum bag by itself, the likelihood of sucking some dust up into the heat seal and giving you a bad seal is really high. So I put it into a little square package. And once again, I like to shape these flatter bags so that they actually hold their shape while you are vacuum packing them. And then once they're vacuum packed, they will be nice and strong or nice and hard, and they'll stay the shape that they're vacuum packed. So once again, we're going to cut off a little piece of this 4mm bag material and put it on just the heat seal bar. We're going to seal the bottom edge of this new bag. We'll run the pump, create a vacuum inside there, run the heat seal. And once the heat seal is created, then we'll have a bag that we can put our flour down inside. Now, I always like to try and hold the shape of these bags so that they'll stack in a box more uniformly. And remember, when you're vacuum packing, this time you put the bag all the way inside the trough, clamp it down in the lid, and just kind of shape your bag a little bit so that it stays that shape once it's vacuum packed. Hit the manual button, allow the machine to pull the air out of the bag, and run the heat seal as soon as you've created a vacuum. And there you have it. Now you have a flour, and then you should label this. Now, I always like to label down toward the bottom of the vacuum bag, and that way you can put the label on the bottom of the vacuum bag, not up toward the top, because every time you open this bag, you're going to reseal it. After you only use about half the flour, you'll still know what it is if you have a label on the bottom instead of the top of the bag. Oh, and the other reason you should vacuum pack your flour is to keep bugs and weevils out of it. There are actually bug eggs in a lot of flour when you buy it, and if you vacuum pack them, they have a real hard time breathing in there, so they just don't ever hatch.